This is a walnut writing desk I made for an article published in Woodwork Magazine in October 2005. Its features are natural edges accentuated with a rotary chisel, a lap drawer made with hand-cut dovetails, and extensive hand and machine tool use in its making. I started by hand planing the top as it was too wide to go through the planer I was using at the time. Because of the amount of material that needed to be removed, I reshaped the plane iron on an old plane to serve as a roughing plane and then moved on to a number 5 Stanley plane to flatten the stock. I finished at last with a number 4 and sanding. Because one of the edges was badly decayed, I removed some stock using a draw knife and then used a rotary chisel to restore a more natural looking edge. The rotary chisel provides the look and feel of small gouge strokes. With the desktop complete, I was able to apply a Danish oil finish and put it aside while attending to the next steps. I assembled a drawer box to house the lap drawer using hand-cut dovetails to attach the corners. The drawer box in my design also serves as the attachment point for the desk's legs. I start layout of the dovetails by using a marking gauge, and then I use a sliding T-bevel set at 8 degrees to lay them out. Then I use the layout of one side to mark the layout of the other side to assure that they are symmetrical. I then use a square to mark my cut lines on the ends of the stock and begin sawing. In this case, I'm using a Western style back saw, though a Dazuki saw would do. I use a sharp chisel to remove the stock between the tails and then mark the pins directly from the tails as shown. Use a marking knife to assure accuracy. Use the back saw to cut the pins. As I saw the pins, note the unusual angle of the saw in the second photo. What's shown is the first step in sawing a miter dovetail, an advanced technique. I use a combination square to mark the miter and then cut first with the saw and then with a sharp chisel. Some careful fitting will be required. With the drawer support frame dovetails cut, I began work on the drawer itself. I used maple drawer sides for a long life and near zero wear over time. I cut the pins and tails for the back corners first, and then the tails at the front corners to fit half-blind dovetails in a walnut drawer front. I marked the pins on the ends of the drawer front directly from the dovetails formed in the sides. I made this task particularly difficult for myself by planning for the drawer to overlap the drawer support, hence the cut on the ends as shown. With the dovetails finished, I use a 3/8 inch router bit and the plunge router to route grooves in the drawer sides and drawer support frame for the solid maple drawer guides to fit. Users are often surprised that these wood-on-wood drawer slides can be smoother than ball-bearing guides. Just a bit of paste wax every 5 years or so keeps them operating smoothly with no wear. I used a plunge router and a 1/4 inch bit to route for the drawer bottom to fit, and then trimmed along the edge of a Baltic birch panel on the table saw to size it to fit the routed grooves. With that done, I was ready to sand and then glue up the drawer and drawer frame, being careful that both were square. I fitted pieces of maple into the drawer support frame to support the drawer. The maple should fit tight in the drawer support box and loose in the drawer itself. To connect the legs to the underside of the drawer frame, I used a hollow chisel mortiser to cut mortise. Then I used the hollow chisel mortiser to form mortises in the feet. Then I began shaping the feet. I made an angle cut with the table saw first and then followed by work with the bandsaw. To visually tie the feet to the top, I used the rotary chisel to provide texture. I make small tapping cuts. Then I began working on the legs by forming slot mortises on each end and using a shop-made tenoning jig on the table saw. Each end of the legs required several cuts. To cut an additional shoulder on each leg, I used a template following router bit in a template that I designed for that purpose. I used a 45-degree chamfer bit in the router table to give the legs additional shape. To stiffen and strengthen the legs, I chose to use my torsion rod technique, which uses wooden rods crossing each other in a manner that triangulates the parts. Then I used a Veritas tensioner to form round tenons on the parts. and drilled round mortises in the legs. Determining the lengths for the torsion rods requires careful measurement. I then used the rotary chisel to texture the front to back stretchers and the torsion rods. Fitting the legs into the drawer support box required some additional chiseling. I used screws to attach the drawer box to the underside of the desk and elongated the screw holes to allow for expansion. In this photo, I'm screwing the drawer box to the underside of the desk. I use slower setting multi-purpose glue to begin assembly. The need for slower setting glue becomes apparent as you adjust the stretchers and torsion rods. With the base unit assembled, slip its tenons into the underside of the drawer support box. With this operation complete, I had a finished desk. If you're interested in other projects with a rustic flair, I recommend my book Rustic Furniture Basics, published by Taunton Press.